Welcome back to the Night Shift, your safe space for talking about UFOs, UAPs, NHI, USOs now, disclosure, and everything else your friends, family, and coworkers are so sick and tired of hearing you go on and on about. This is your safe space. So if you want to hang out with us for the next hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, who knows, and get weird, we would love to have you. So welcome aboard, everybody. It's Friday, March 21st. It's 2:04 on the East Coast, and we are back with a very exciting show. My son's been home for spring break. He's 3.5 years old. He's on spring break for a week. And I'm not, like, time is all different for me now. Everything's just completely warped, and it's all weird. So I feel like it's been a year since since we were doing this, but it's only been a week. Xander, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. I heard a lot of papers rustling around there just at the start. Are you still... You're of the generation that prints off stuff still?
I still print stuff. I have 3 notepads. These are my reporter's notepads. This is what I'm scribbling on the show. These are the books on my desk. Look at this. This is my desk right now.
It's respectful.
This is this week's stack. I got some more over here. It's a mess. I haven't been in here.
The brains and the brawn.
I don't know about that, but certainly the mess, that's for sure. This is a disaster. But it's exciting to be back. We have so much going on. A couple channel updates. Let me just check here. We're sitting at just under 24,000 subscribers. And I think we might be able to push it over the line today if we're really good. We're at 23,922 subscribers. So maybe in the next 24 hours, guys, if we can really pull it together, we might cross that barrier. And that'd be awesome. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Rain of Rain is here. Hey, Rain of Rain. Cosmic Serpent. Ebony McKickass. Sorry, Ebony. Chris is here, of course. Obi-Wan Shinobi, The Foreboding. Hey, guys. Avi Z. Great to see you all here. Thanks for joining us on this Friday. So this is a really exciting episode because we have Birdie Jaworski is back with us. We had a little bit of a kerfuffle the last time around, and we had some connection problems. We were able to get those sorted out. We rescheduled Birdie, and she's back. And this timing is actually even better because we just wrapped with a great sit down with Richard Dolan last week. If you had a chance to see that, then it was a real treat. We got a chance to talk to Richard, and he went in depth about a lot of things that we had some questions about. And that was a very exciting conversation. And he spoke at the first Psionics Summit along with Birdie, which was just a few weeks ago. And I believe the second one is coming up soon. And we have Georg from Ubiquity University, who's going to be joining us next Friday. So we just had Richard, and now we've got Birdie, and then Georg's going to be back with us next Friday. So it's the Psionics Summit lineup. It's very exciting. Anyway, Birdie, how are you?
I'm doing great, Clint. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's so good to see you again. How is life, and what's going on in your world?
It is a beautiful life, and I'm having a wonderful time. I've been working with students who are developing their remote viewing skills. I have been looking at a lot of interesting things out there, and I have been helping organize Psionics Summit 2, which we are very excited about. And as you mentioned, Richard Dolan will be joining us for that, and it looks like it's going to be a wonderful panel discussion.
What's the date for Psionics Summit 2? Do we have a firm date on that yet?
We do. It is March 30th at 11 a.m. Pacific. So that would be 2 p.m. on the East Coast. And we're going to have an open discussion between a number of people, most who were in the last Psionics Summit. So we have David Clements, Richard Dolan, Chris Bledsoe, Jim Garrison, Sarah Gam, and others. It's going to be a wonderful conversation. We're going to focus on the ethics of ET communication. What does it mean if we have these kinds of interactions with what's out there? Are there any things we as members of the human race should keep in mind. So it should be a good discussion.
I'm interested in one of the first things we wanted to talk to you about after the first Psionics Summit was your take on it. And I know that it was kind of new territory. They had a lot of different speakers. It was a short period of time, and I think there was a lot of information to kind of fit into that small window. What was your take on it? It seems like we're really entering a new phase of the conversation around ET contact, and Ubiquity's kind of at the forefront of this.
We really are entering a new phase in this whole disclosure efforts, or in awakening efforts, I guess I would rather call it. Since 2017, we've been on this disclosure path with Lou Elizondo coming out, talking about his experiences working as the director of ATIP, the government's UFO investigation program. We've had a number of whistleblowers come out in the meantime. We've had members of Congress who are working to get this stuff disclosed, getting together a program that will allow whistleblowers to come forward with protection and unveil all of these secrets that have been hiding for multiple decades about crash retrievals, about encounters that people have had, about reverse engineering the crash retrievals, what we might have figured out from studying crash saucers or other equipment. But what's happened over the past couple of years is this new focus on consciousness. And now we have new UAP whistleblower Jake Barber, who has come out and talked about his own crash retrieval efforts, but not only the fact that he has literally seen and touched downed craft, he has communicated with them. And now he is part of a program called Skywatcher, and they are filming their efforts to call down these craft. They call who they are psionics, meaning they're using their intuition and consciousness to reach out and to, bring the ships in or communicate, get a message, send a message, get a message. It's new territory, and it's extremely exciting.
So is it that the technology, the hardware itself, like this is what's, I think, a big jump for a lot of people is we were talking, say, maybe 18 months ago about the disclosure amendment, and there was a lot of discussion about hardware and craft and bodies and really tangible stuff. And we were going to potentially get our hands on some of that and be able to make sense of it. But now the conversation has moved into this completely different direction. And I think a lot of people are trying to bridge that gap. Like, how do you go from hardware to psionics? Can you help people understand exactly what that connection is?
Absolutely. For since 2017, the focus has been on the hardware. We had the Navy pilots who experienced this tic tac that had all these anomalous moves that can't be explained by physics today. But everyone was focused on the craft itself. We've had a lot of discussion around crash retrievals, about different kinds of materials, metamaterials that different scientists in particular labs, such as Gary Nolan at Stanford University, are studying. But the focus has been on the nuts and bolts, as they say in ufology. It hasn't been on who the heck is driving these things, who the heck created these things. And that is where the conversation is opening up. It's one thing to talk about retrieving a craft that has some dead bodies in it and dissecting those bodies and looking at them. And it's a completely different animal to talk about these beings that created these craft and how they communicate with us or with each other. And in many cases, this is a telepathic or a consciousness based of some sort communication that people who have had training in remote viewing or in different kinds of meditation, such as CE5 protocols, they're able to have this conversation with them. And what also has been described recently by Jake Barber and by others is that some of these craft don't have pilots. The craft are sentient themselves. It is a piece of machinery in some kind of way, but it also holds consciousness itself and is able to communicate. So the conversation is shifting from what are the physical materials and the propulsion methods and how did these things fall out of the sky to What's the driving force behind these things? And are we able to establish a relationship with it? So it's really interesting how this is unfolding.
That really is fascinating because it answers a lot of strange questions that have been floating around for a long time. Like you've got Bob Lazar, for example, talks about
Right.
going inside one of these craft, and he says like there's nothing in there. It's super boring, and it's like everything's smooth. There's no buttons. There's no console. It's just a couple of chairs, and there's some equipment, but it doesn't. It all blends in together, and it's like one piece. And you're like, how do you interact with a craft like that? And there's been whispers and rumors of stuff like this for years, but to have it kind of confirmed, it's a whole new level.
It is, absolutely. It's a completely different level. And what's interesting is that we've had a number of people and groups out there that have been connecting with these craft or with the beings behind the craft over decades. A lot of people who are experiencers or contactees have had very direct relationships with whatever this intelligence is. And I believe that there's many different types of non-human intelligence out there. I don't think it's one particular species or type. I think we've got a number of things going on here on this planet. But what's also interesting is that now we're getting groups that are forming, such as people that are doing meditation, getting together, doing group meditations, such as CE5 or related types of meditations. And they are having real experiences. I'm the organizer for a really big UFO group here in New Mexico. It's actually the biggest UFO group in the whole country. And every first Saturday of the month, we go out to the foothills of the Sandia Mountains here in Albuquerque, and we do one of these meditations. And we have seen things. We have seen orbs or different kinds of things that seem to respond to what we're thinking or what we're putting out there, what we're sending out. And it's been fascinating. And now we've got Jake Barber, his Skywatcher group. So there are opportunities for people that are interested in developing a relationship or finding out what's possible to actually get out there and try this themselves. It's pretty cool.
So when somebody says psionics, are we talking about the same basic idea as what remote viewing is? Like, can you bring all of these terms? They're kind of, there's telekinesis and psychic and psionic and remote viewer. Is this all the same thing, or are these different versions of the same thing?
Yeah, it's essentially on a continuum. We are highly intuitive, consciousness-based beings. Every single one of us has moments throughout our day or throughout our lives where we just simply know something that we shouldn't know. We think about a family member that we haven't talked to in a long time, and then they call you 10 minutes later. Or you think about your grandmother and you just get the sense that something has happened and you find out that she passed on the moment you thought about her. Or you're walking down the street and you feel that someone's staring at you, and then boom, you turn around and they are looking at you. So we are very psychic, intuitive, creative beings. And all of these things, whether you want to call it psychic ability, whether you want to call it remote viewing, psionics, it all springs from the same fountain inside of us. It's this natural ability that we have. Now, if you think about things like people who are natural psychics, they're not following a particular set of rules or protocols to get their information. It just comes to them, or they meditate and it comes to them. And then we have remote viewers, such as myself, and we have learned particular techniques that allow us to access that deep intuition and to share it with others through story and language and sketches. And then we have the term psionics, which kind of refers to all of this. It's a very loose term, meaning, as Jake Barber describes, people using their own intuitive, creative, consciousness-based abilities to reach out and send or receive a message. So all of these things are essentially the same, but with different methods or trappings.
Right. So it's like swimming. There's different ways to swim, but swimming is swimming more or less. You're doing
exactly backstroke or the crawl or
the dog paddle or cannonball.
Right. Yeah.
So is this something that everybody just innately has access to? Is this, I mean, as far as you're aware, can anyone do this?
100%. Every single person on this planet is 100% capable. I have trained over the past 30 years thousands of people across the world, and I haven't met a psychic brick yet. If you learn remote viewing, you will be able to do it. Now, this is like all other abilities out there. It's like learning a musical instrument. Say you pick up the guitar and you're new to it and you take a couple of lessons. Everybody can learn to play a basic song, but some people will eventually become, band members or even get a album deal because they're so good. There's levels of natural ability, but even the people that struggle at the beginning, they still see that it's real for them. And if they put some work in, it opens up that ability and they can achieve a high level at any of these practices. It's pretty amazing. I've never met anyone who put time into it who didn't over time discover that they became more and more able to describe things outside of their own time and space.
Okay, you said something a minute ago that I thought was really interesting. There's many things that are very interesting, but one of them, I like the way you described sort of the psychic insight as sort of a sudden knowingness, or
Right.
I guess I'm trying to tease out, and I'm wondering if you can help me understand this. How do you differentiate between your normal mental chatter and just thoughts about whatever, and did I leave the candle burning in the thing, or did I turn off the whatever, or did I lock the front door, and these moments where you're getting some information coming from outside? How do you know which is which?
It takes some practice to figure out what's going on in your own mind. Now, the data, if you're a remote viewer, such as I am, the data has a certain feel to it, which you can begin to understand that feeling over time. At the beginning, it can be hard to figure out what your mind is trying to say. And we all come to this, no matter who you are or how amazing you are as a remote viewer or a natural psychic, you still have your own basis of past beliefs, your own education, your own religious upbringing, your own family life, your education level. All of these things, you have to filter it through your own expectations and your own understanding. So that takes just some understanding and practice to get to a point where you're able to look at something in a more objective way. So, at the beginning, when you do a remote viewing session, say you're doing your first one, you may get the sense that, say it's a county fair. That's what you're meant to remote view. You don't know what it is. You're doing this blind. You've just been given some random numbers, but the target is a photo of a county fair. And there's kids on a Ferris wheel in this county fair, and there's a kid eating a corn dog and another kid eating cotton candy in the photo. So when you sit down for your session, if you're new to this, you may describe things in terms of metaphor or in terms of a comparison or an analogy. You might in your inner mind might be thinking, wow, I smell fair foods and there's a lot of kids here and they're having a lot of fun. So your mind may think, oh, it's Disneyland. And so you might start drawing and describing Disneyland because your mind is trying to put together these pieces. But in reality, it's a county fair, but you can see, what the similarities are there. So new students have to look at their sessions after and figure out what steps their inner mind took to reach those conclusions. It's those steps that are the real data. So it like any other process that you learn, it takes time and it takes some intention and energy to get there.
So you originally, when you first learned to remote view, were you learning the original old school protocols that were developed through the Stargate system?
Yeah, essentially, I was learning SRV, scientific remote viewing, as was termed by Dr. Courtney Brown at the Farsight Institute. He was just starting Farsight at that time. I was one of the very first students. And SRV at that time was essentially the military method, CRV, controlled remote viewing, with a couple of little differences, but it's essentially a derivative of the military method. And since then, though, I've developed a completely outside the box way of doing this that I call TransDimensional Mapping, that allows you to use all different kinds of art supplies, large scale paper, and allows you to develop this really cool narrative. So at the end of your session, you can tell a story about the experience you just had. It's super fun.
Can you, for people just who are new to this idea of remote viewing, can you explain what's different about? I mean, obviously, there's your method is different and takes it in a different direction. But what was the original idea behind the protocols, the way they were developed, and then where did you decide to break off and try doing something different? How did that evolve?
Yeah, so the original program, for those new to the idea of remote viewing, in 1995, the government came out and declassified a secret program that had been running for around 20 years, for 2 full decades. They spent $20 million of taxpayer money on this. And at that time, that was a lot of money. It'd be a lot more money today, right? But this program was called the Stargate Program, a very evocative name. And the Stargate Program took scientists, researchers, and natural psychics, such as very famous natural psychic Ingo Swann, and they worked with guys who were in the military, men and women in the military, and they came up with a set of protocols. In other words, things that you do that would help these military people access anything, anytime, any place. And they called the set of protocols in this process remote viewing. Now, the reason they came up with these protocols was because they discovered that, we have these two hemispheres in our mind, a left brain and a right brain. We are, animals that have two halves of a brain. And the left brain that we all have and we all use is very controlling. It's manipulative. It wants to make conclusions. This is just from established scientific research. It likes to be in control. Whereas the right side of our brain is extremely fluid, creative, intuitive. It looks for patterns and it likes the ambiguity, and it's able to access that intuitive, creative side of us. So these protocols were developed to keep that noisy left brain busy, that part of your brain that wants to know what something is, so that your right brain can let loose with the information. So the original remote viewing protocols would have you do a number of techniques. You'd first start with a little doodle, and the little doodle would tell you something about what is there. Like if I asked everybody out in the audience right now, hey, in that fast, like in a split second, I would like for you to draw something representing water. Boom, that fast. I don't have to look at your papers. Everyone's drawn a wavy line, right? If I asked you to draw a mountain that fast, again, everyone's drawn, a mountain-shaped thing. It may be rounded at the top or it may have a peak at the top, but everyone's drawn something that looks like that. And so we have this natural, intuitive understanding of the world around us. So you start a session by doing one of these quick doodles, and they're called ideograms. And the original protocols would then move on from there, where you'd start describing low-level sensory descriptive data, such as the first colors that come to mind, or temperatures, tastes, smells, things like that, sensory data, how tall or short something is, how hot or cold something is. And then you would move on to sketching, and the protocols then develop as you go. So that's the original controlled remote viewing method in a very short nutshell. And you can find lots of examples online. There are many, many talented remote viewers out there who use these original military protocols. But back in the day, I've been doing this since it was declassified. So for 30 years, which is a long time. And so 30 years ago, I started by learning this military derivative set of protocols. And after a while, I decided that I didn't like some of the things about the protocols. I felt that it was too restrictive and too militaristic. The language that they use the word target. which I will use that today as we talk because everybody knows what that means. That's the thing you're supposed to remote view. But the word target implies hitting or missing something, vectoring in on the very center. And I felt that was psychologically defeating. So at first, about 26 years ago, I started changing the language. But after time, I decided that what we needed to do was to start looking at relationships between the pieces of data that you get in a session so that you can start building the story, the real story of what's happening so you could truly know what's going on. And I call that mapping. So that's what I do today.
So when you use this technique, are you... how long is a session? How do you get it? Do you have to do anything to get into the zone, as it were, or like how does a typical session go?
I think for most people who are fairly new to it or doing it for a few years, they like to do a cool down first. So a meditation, maybe some breath work. It's very individual for each person, what makes them feel like they're dropping everything going around in their world so that they're not thinking about work or the fight they just had with their partner. And some people listen to binaural music, binaural meaning different frequencies go in each ear. You have to listen with earbuds or headphones for this binaural music. There's lots of examples. And the Monroe Institute has some amazing examples that you can get their app and listen and put yourself in a particular brainwave state. So that is how people start a session. And a session kind of depends. It can, for me, most of my sessions go for at least an hour, oftentimes 2 hours. And sometimes I'll split up a session. I'll do the first part on one day and spend an hour or two. And then the next day I'll go back to it. And I think the longest session I ever did was about 60 hours. And it took me, a few weeks to complete. But that was a very complicated question that someone had given me to look at.
60 hours.
Yeah. I've done over 10,000 sessions. So,
wow. So you can do, so a session can be, so a session would be like one topic of
a session's
inquiry.
One talk. Great. Yeah. So maybe somebody wants you to look at the Taj Mahal and they've got a photo of the Taj Mahal somewhere.
Right.
Or maybe it's an event like the JFK assassination. Or maybe it's, those are like things in the present and in the past, but you can look at the future. Like last August, I taught a class. This is my first class after coming back into the public field. And I gave my students the winner of the upcoming 2024 US presidential election. And at the time, this was around the time that Kamala Harris had thrown her hat into the ring. There was a lot of energy around her. People were very excited about her as a candidate. And so there was a sense that she might win. But my students, every single one of them, described Donald Trump in their sessions. And half of the students hated Donald Trump, and half of the students that they liked him or loved him. And so it was really interesting to see how the data manifested. And this was, several months before the election. So since August, we knew who was going to win. It was done deal. But it's interesting. This is a good example of what I was mentioning before about how you bring yourself into the picture. The people that don't like Trump were describing him as manipulative, conceited, a liar, a cheater. And the people that love Trump were describing him as patriotic, somebody who cares about the country or cares about his people.
Wow.
So
the filter,
you are who you are.
So your data, whatever data you're getting, you're filtering it through your own experience. So it's biased in a sense.
Exactly.
One way or another.
You can't help it. You get real data, but it's like anything, remote viewing, it's not a perfect objective tool. It's you telling a story about an experience that you're having, a non-local experience that you're having. And just like if you were to call up a friend and tell them a story about an experience that you had today, you would use things like comparisons and analogies. You'd say, hey, it's like the time that mom stole the pickles from the grocery store, or you would say, well, I don't like that person. I don't like that person. Or I love that woman, or I love that man, so you can't help but put your own opinions in. It's the same thing. We're natural storytellers, and remote viewing is essentially storytelling.
So is that why, or is that maybe one of the reasons why you always well, always, but I hear a lot about remote viewers working in groups. It's like 5 or 6 remote viewers working on one thing. Is that to kind of find the best fit for all of the data among a bunch of different perspectives?
Yes, 100%. You can divide up remote viewers generally into 3 larger categories. And those 3 categories are visual remote viewers. And so if you go online and you look up remote viewing results and you see different targets that are out there and people will show their work. So, the photo is the White House and then they've drawn the White House. So when you think about remote viewing, most people think about those photos they've seen online, those scans of sessions where people drew something that looked just like the picture, something expected. So that would be a visual remote viewer. But there are 2 other kinds of remote viewers. There's a conceptual remote viewer, and I place myself in that category. A conceptual remote viewer may get some visual data, but they get a lot of data that relates to the who, what, when, where, and why. They know what's happening. They know the importance of it. They can recognize different aspects of it. So they'll get a lot of written language and not as many sketches. And then the other category, and this is a smaller category than the other 2, and it's emotional remote viewers. And these are people that connect really closely and deeply to the emotions of a person or a being or an animal or a place. Because places hold, memory and emotion too, like this Civil War battlefields or concentration camps. Even if you looked at Auschwitz today, it would be just a horrifying session, and you'd feel very depressed and sad, even though the atrocities happened so many years ago. It still holds that memory.
Can looking at something that's really dark and heavy like that actually affect you after the session for days or hours? Or
Yes, it absolutely can. I have done sessions that stayed with me for days. And I still sometimes remember sessions that were particularly intense, looking at some of the nuclear atrocities that have happened out there, whether it's some of the first atomic bombs or perhaps like a Chernobyl disaster, Fukushima. Actually, in a class I gave a couple months ago, I gave out the Fukushima disaster to the classmates. And one of the students, he wasn't even 20 minutes into the session and he stood up and he had to leave the room. He was bawling, completely crying. And he had drawn a man in a uniform at the controls of this nuclear power plant. And he knew that this was in Japan. He knew what this was. And this man was one of those people, one of the operators that had decided to stay behind and to shut the reactors down. These people knew they were going to die. It was a death sentence to stay there. It was a sacrifice they made. And my student just was bawling and crying, and he couldn't complete any more work the rest of that day. He was just it really affected him on a deep level, but it also made him realize how amazing this process is. And the next day he was ready to dive in again because it was so intense for him. Now, when you have an experience like that, it's called bilocation. When you know that you are literally there, you can feel it and smell it and taste it and everything. It's visceral. You just know. So he had an incredible experience.
He was one of the more empath type remote viewers.
Yeah, I would call him a conceptual. I'd actually call him a conceptual remote viewer with a little bit of visual acuity. So he knew what was going on, but what was interesting was in his background, he had lived in Japan for a while. And I didn't know this when I tasked this to the class. He's not Japanese, he's Canadian, but he had lived in Japan. He had a long-term Japanese girlfriend. So we had this deep connection to the culture, which is what I think bridged that for him.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I have on my desk here, this is a book that I haven't started yet, but I can't wait to start it. This is The Reality of ESP by Russell Targ.
Oh, Russell Targ.
And Russell Targ was one of the original researchers who developed those protocols. And as you were just talking about the drawings, this is a picture that Ingo Swann drew, which is kind of hard to show, but he's drawing the rings of Saturn in 1973, and this wasn't confirmed until 6 years later. when the probe passed by and then photographed the rings. But he was able to draw them. And this book has got a lot of examples of that for people who are interested, of just the sketches that are done that are so specific. And you can see a lot of really interesting examples of it. It said in the beginning of the book, in the intro, I got that far, that they would often have the best luck with people who had never tried it before, that were just totally new to this. And they would just sit down and do it, like on their first try. And that kind of blew
there's
them
this
away.
whole idea of beginner's luck that a lot of people talk about in remote viewing. But I have a different take on beginner's luck, because this is what people have reported happening. So you take a first class in remote viewing with the trainer of your choice, right? Military, ex-military trainer, one of their students, or somebody who's way outside the box like me. And you have this incredible set of experiences. And then you go home and you start to practice. And people sometimes feel that their ability takes a nosedive after they leave the class, after they leave the training experience. I don't believe that the ability takes a nosedive. I think what is happening is some psychological conditioning, because my whole philosophy behind this is you get what you get. I believe that all data is relevant, that you're never actually wrong per se. It's a question of interpretation. Your mind is giving you, like I explained before, like metaphors or comparisons, storylines, and you have to deconstruct what those things mean. That's a big part of the system I use, is looking at your session afterward and figuring out, why did I get this piece of information? And you can always figure out a reason why. But for most people, if they don't create a sketch that looks like the photo, they feel like they failed in some way. And the more that you tell yourself that you were wrong, the more you start shutting down that natural ability, because our subconscious minds are kind of like a little 2-year-old toddler. The more you tell it, bad, 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 wrong, don't do it this way. You didn't do a great job here. You messed this up. It's like a little kid. If you keep telling somebody that they're horrible, they're going to start believing it. So I think that that's what's really going on when people feel, well, there's this beginner's luck and then it may drop off. I really think it's self-conditioning that's happening.
I feel like a lot of people have been just convinced for most of their lives that, especially just regular folks, that you're told this can't be real, that there's no such thing as psychic abilities or telepathy, and we're kind of told that, and then we find out later, oh wait, well, it kind of is real, and they spent a lot of money on it, and there are people that do it, and there's a weird kind of, I don't know, it's just weird to square that circle for people, and I wonder how much that kind of holds people back.
I need to interrupt here, because I literally, in my head, as you were saying that, I was thinking, if anybody asked me if I believe in remote viewing and ESP, I would say 100% yes. I absolutely believe in it. There's an overwhelming amount of evidence to support the claims made. But then whenever I enter a conversation like this, it's like my mind is on the back foot, and it's like I'm trying to pick apart in a really unnecessary way all of the arguments. So like I'm thinking of like questions that just really get down into the nitty-gritty detail and really kind of sidetrack from the overall truth of what people are trying to say with all of this. And that's what I'm thinking. Like it feels like mental conditioning. Like I know I shouldn't believe in this, and yet I do, but there's still a very large part of me that's like, nope, resist.
Yeah, resist. I feel that's how I feel too. That's a great way to put it. It's like, it is mental conditioning in a way, right? You're kind of like, I keep looking for the definitive moment where like I can go, that's what was the thing about UFOs, right? This was the thing. It's
right.
Like, I want to see the UFO in a warehouse. I want them to go in there with a camera crew and like show it to me so I can go there. Now I know for sure. But this is so personal and remote viewing and it's such a, I feel like I wouldn't trust my own brain. I feel like I'd be doing it, and I've meditated and Xander, I know you meditate and have various different things that you've tried. My issue is always deciding like what's my own internal monologue and what's coming from outside. Sometimes that's really difficult to do, and I think it's easy to talk yourself out of it. if you're
It
getting an insight.
absolutely is. Yeah, it's absolutely easy to talk yourself out of it, or to, tell yourself that you aren't doing a good job, or that you're no good at this. That self-talk, it, like everything in life, whether, it's like an Olympic athlete. If you're an Olympic athlete, what do you do as an Olympic athlete during your training? You do all these visualization exercises. This is like typical with high-level athletes, where they imagine themselves jumping over the high bar, or being the fastest person across the finish line in the 100 meters, whatever the particular event is. And they will do this over and over in their minds. But sometimes people in professional sports or in the Olympics, they will start thinking, I can't do it. I can't do it. This person's better. That person's better. And then that reduces their ability. It's like this with everything in life. We've all experienced this just in school. There's always kids smarter than us, right? In school. And you think, wow, I could never be as smart as that kid. And then that kid just keeps, doing better and better and better. And your grades might start dropping because you feel that you can't compete. But I think that that's just a very human part of who we are. And that's why over, all these different years, a lot of different psychologists and life coach type people have come out and talked about things like self-talking, how to talk to yourself, or affirmations, using positive affirmations as a means of changing how your mind works. In fact, it's kind of the whole basis of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is widely used in psychotherapy, a way to help people get over bad habits or get past post-traumatic stress syndrome and other things like that. The way that you talk to yourself is ultimately extraordinarily important. And I think it's very important in the process of remote viewing or ET contact, if you want to be a psionic and send a message out.
Well, I want to get to that in a second, but I just looked up. It's called the Bannister effect. This is this thing that always jumps to mind when you describe what you just said about this mental talk. And it was Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile in 1954. But prior to that, many believed it was physically impossible for a human being to run that fast. But 46 days after he did it, an Australian runner did it. And then over the next few years, it just became more and more common. And now it's commonplace for people to run a 4-minute mile. Not common, but it's routinely done.
Yeah, it was actually in the news
so
yesterday that a 15-year-old just broke the 4-minute mile record for that age group.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you're absolutely right about it. It is a mental barrier that we all have about all of these things. But now we're starting to break through this barrier in terms of looking at things in the consciousness mindset. And it's pretty exciting to see. We've had people that have been doing CE5 for some years, or related type meditations. But now, as more and more people are getting involved, you're seeing these barriers breaking down and more things appearing in the sky, more and more open contact. It's pretty incredible.
There is, I think a lot of people, it was the telepathy tapes.
Yes.
Really was their first look at this, to seeing someone do it and watching those videos on the website where you're like, there's no way this kid could possibly see what the number on the calculator is across the room. And they know, and it's just like when you see it happen, you go, wow, maybe this is something that everybody just has. This is some kind of, it's a sense that it's a capability that we just never learned how to teach, but maybe before language, this would be how hunter-gatherer societies maybe had some kind of pre-language communication. If you could really tune it up and maybe spend 10,000 years developing it and really get good, you would have technology built around this whole way of working and communicating, and you could build ships that respond to it. And it's just so fascinating to think about all the possibilities, what it could mean.
That's right.
I want to talk about ET contact, but I wanted to also just real quick circle back to, you've done work for various different law enforcement agencies in your career. Is there anything you can talk about how you use this skill set in kind of practical everyday terms to find information that can help people?
Yeah, right now my group is working with a couple of different law enforcement agencies on 2 missing persons cases. And the way that we do this is pretty interesting. Now, I've done this for years. I did this, 25 years ago, been very successful helping to locate missing persons who usually have passed on by the point, that I get called in. But sometimes someone is still alive, and I'll tell a funny story about that. But the way that I approach this is pretty interesting. If you know that someone is missing, but you have no idea where they might be right now, maybe it's a woman who's missing. Like a good example is we're looking right now at a particular missing person case, a woman who had gone missing. And the police, the law enforcement agency involved, suspects that she was killed by her boyfriend. And so what they really are most interested in, and the boyfriend has died since this happened. And so they're looking to find her remains, her body, to be able to put this case to rest and to give the family some peace. So when you have a missing person, the way I work this as a remote viewer is I would give some of the remote viewers a task such as, what is the northernmost easily identifiable landmark? What is the most easily identifiable landmark to the north? And have them describe that. Give somebody else the most easily describable landmark to the east. And so you do it for all the cardinal directions, and that can set you up a perimeter. And then you look on Google Maps, or look at the area, and then you can start vectoring in, and then you change your tasks as you go until you can pinpoint exactly where the remains might be. Sometimes in the wilderness, remains are scattered around, so you have to kind of work with the data as it comes. But I've also worked on cases where, and this wasn't for law enforcement, but this is a pretty funny case. It was for a roller coaster developer. And they developed a lot of the big, huge, fancy roller coasters you see at like Universal Studios, Disneyland, things like that. And one of their partners had absconded with something like $20 million. It was a huge amount of money, and they had no luck with the police. They had no luck anywhere with private investigators, and out of desperation, they called me. I'm your last resort, people. So they called me, and I had my people work on this, and I worked on this, and I figured out now the roller coaster developer lived on the East Coast, and he had another associate on the West Coast. But I discovered in looking at the sessions that everybody was drawing or describing the Sydney Opera House in Australia. It was so obvious just from the language, from the conceptual viewers, the sketches, from the visual viewers. And so I knew that this guy was in Australia, and we looked closer and closer, and I got maps out and figured about where in Sydney he might be, presented it to my client, and he flew me out with him to Australia, to Sydney, to find this guy. And I was able to march him right into the location he was, and we found him just sitting right there. And the guy really freaked out. And what was really interesting was this guy, it came up in a lot of the sessions that he had a particular physical ailment. He had something wrong with one of his internal organs. It was a very serious issue, but my client didn't know that this was the case. And so when we saw him there, and I said, yeah, and you've got a problem with your kidneys too.
Wow.
And the guy about fell over. So
oh my God.
They worked on a deal. So that was pretty fun.
That's crazy. So that is so brilliant. So you take different, for the location thing, you take different remote viewers and you have them identify different landmarks.
Exactly.
That's genius.
Yeah.
And then you just correlate that on a map, and you're like, oh, the old church, the hill with the house on it. If you put in the task the most easily identifiable, you're going to get something everybody can figure out. Yeah, you might get an old church or a cemetery site or a old well or a mine, depending on where you are. Wow. Yeah. That is so clever. It's brilliant.
Thank you.
So you're leaning into this really slippery, sort of difficult to wrap your hands around talent that people have, this ability, but you're applying a structure to it that gives you some kind of usable data that you come away with this with something you can actually work with and go to the location and find the guy, or go to the place.
Wow. You have to have the mindset, I think no matter what you're doing in remote viewing, you have to have the mindset that you are a detective. Now, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be Sherlock Holmes or something like that. I loved mystery stories and I wanted to be a private detective. And so that's how I approach all of this work. I approach every session like I'm looking for all of these little clues that I can put together and figure out the narrative. So doing this kind of work is extraordinarily rewarding and it's fun. It's fun. You get to be a detective every single time. You're looking for clues. You're trying to put those clues together. And the more you think about the relationship between the clues that you gather, it can tell you a lot about what's there.
Wow. So is there like a ranking system, or is there like a skill scale, like a black belt in jujitsu, or you know what I mean? Like, where do you fall on the remote viewing talent spectrum? Like, is there a way to like rank ability? Does that make sense? Am I asking?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think that it's a question that's difficult to answer because there certainly are some people who absolutely excel at drawing exactly what is there. Like the famous military remote viewer Joe McMoneagle, considered the best of the best. Ingo Swann, natural psychic who helped develop the protocols, the best of the best.
McMoneagle straight up just recently on Jesse Michaels' podcast was talking about buildings on Mars. He's like, there's buildings, you can see he has pictures from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory that he's showing them. He's like, yep, there's the building, there's this. And anyway, sorry, I interrupted. But
no, you're good. So there are some people that, they get a blue ribbon because they have this body of work behind them. Now, I've been in this for 30 years. And so, and I do 2 sessions a day. One, when I first get up around, I'm an early bird. I get up at like 2 a.m. and I do my first session right after that. Get some coffee, sit down, do my work. I go to bed really early. So, it's the old lady in me. What can I say? and then I do one later in the day. And so, 2 sessions every single day over 30 years, it really adds up. And some days I do more than 2. So, and because I've done a lot, I would say that I'm pretty good, but I don't know where I would rank on a scale. I tend to think of everybody, regardless of how new they are to it or how experienced they are. I think everyone's data is valid and worthy of praise and understanding. So I tend to look at it from a different perspective than ranking people. I mean, you can certainly look at some of the luminaries and say, wow, they're amazing. And
well, I guess a better way of saying what I'm trying to ask is like, if someone were taking a course, one of your courses, and they wanted to explore this ability, and maybe they think they have it and they're not sure, and they really want to get some clarity, how do you know where their skills are at any given time? Are they, like a level 1 or a level 2 or a level 3, or is it more holistic than that? And it's just, you kind of follow them on and they learn at their own pace and eventually they just start to get it. How does this process work when you're teaching someone?
Yeah, I would say it's a very holistic process. At the beginning, I have a particular way of teaching so that everybody can follow along and understand what we're doing. I have a workshop that I did a couple of weeks ago online over Zoom, and it's now available on YouTube if anyone wants to take a look at that. That's at my No Rivets YouTube channel. And anyone can learn the basics, the absolute basics. And so the way I evaluate students is I see how they're doing by not by how their sketches look or even the written language, but how they can describe their session to me. And to me, it's this level of understanding that really tells me how they've developed. So if they can look at their session and they can say, I drew this because of this reason, or I got this language because of this reason. If they can justify every piece of data, that is somebody who's going places with this. And for the rest of it, it just takes a lot of practice. I kind of estimate it takes, I would say, a minimum of 300 solid 1-hour remote viewing sessions before you really start to make huge leaps in understanding and in development. So if you do a session a day in a year, you'll start getting somewhere.
That doesn't
you'll
sound
have
too bad.
well, hey, if you were going to learn how to how to play guitar in a year, everyday practice, you get somewhere, right?
Yeah, speak Spanish or go to the gym for an hour a day, whatever it is you're going to do.
Exactly.
That actually doesn't sound that insurmountable. I think it's just
It's
a
not.
discipline thing, right? Just setting up the time.
It's always a discipline thing. It's always a discipline thing. And some people have, and for some it's not discipline. It's just where they are in their lives. Maybe they're, really busy with their career, or they're raising a family and they don't have the time, or they've got some stress in their life. But if you have some time and you're interested in being a super psychic spy, get on board and have some fun. You can look at like the most ancient past, like not even the ancient past on Earth, like back to the, our most ancient recorded history, like the Sumerians and things like that. You can look at how the Earth was created. You can look at the creation of the universe. You can look at things way far in the future. I gave one of my recent classes, at the end of the class, I gave them humanity 100 years in the future. And it blew everyone away. Everyone got the same.
Do we make it?
We do. We actually make it. I am betting on us. I'm betting on us, Clint. We are absolutely going to make it. I wasn't
sure if we're going to make the next 10. So that's
good
to hear.
We are. We're going to have some hard times in the interim, but we are going to make it. And we're going to be, we're going to come out on the other side of this a more beautiful, connected, loving species that gets rid of resource hoarding, gets rid of the political divides. We start looking at things in a different way. And of course, within that time period, we do experience open contact, in the ET sense. So that's also a big part of what pushes us along that path. So you can look at anything. So who wouldn't want to learn this, right? You can look at, I gave one of my classes, the biggest secret in the world, as a task. So you can look at anything.
So tell me this then, if you're teaching people, when you teach kids, you teach a course for children,
yes.
And you have one coming up, yes?
Yes. Yeah, on Sunday, I'm teaching a class for parents and children. It's called Teach Your Child, to Remote View. And it's this Sunday, and it's through Ubiquity University. And we're going to just really do a supernatural, intuitive form of my TransDimensional mapping that's perfect for kids that are, they don't have to be able to read yet, as long as they love to sketch and to draw and to work on their paper. With art supplies, they will have an amazing time. We're going to look at different kinds of photographs. We're going to look at having a little bit of communication with some pets, perhaps, or maybe a whale or a dolphin or a tiger or some kind of interesting animal. It's going to be really fun and open. What's cool about kids is that they completely do not have the built-in cultural and religious filters that we have. We grow up thinking that these things are not real, or we're told this, or it's beaten to our heads, however we come into the world. But kids are so open. They're still so open. So they, like in the telepathy tapes involving children, it's the same kind of a thing. They take to this like no other. My 10-year-old daughter is incredible at this. Incredible. My 10-year-old granddaughter, she's incredible. Yeah.
I think that's brilliant. And I love this idea of working with kids to see if you can tap into their innate ability before they get kind of bogged down with all of the, like you said, the sort of vocabulary of our culture and all of the expectations and assumptions that are baked into that.
It's really weird that as you were talking about that, I heard my 2-year-old in the background. She's just going to bed right now. And it's just really weird that we're talking about this as I hear her literally, she's going apeshit behind me.
Do you, Xander, with your daughter, do you have like little psychic friend moments where you just like think something and she says it out loud, or do you ever have those?
I don't know, because you
so
know as well as I do.
Time.
Yeah, well, that too. You know as well as I do that the connection is like no other connection. And it certainly goes beyond just verbal connection, 100%. But, I spend 99% of my waking life with her, so I see her body language all the time, and that's a whole language in itself. So I don't know whether there's some sort of mind connection there. I would not be surprised if there was. And for me personally, I found becoming a father very difficult. Like I just simply did not enjoy being a father at first, but as that connection's built up over time, she's like the only thing I think about when she's not around. Like it's a completely I've never had that before.
Yeah.
And that's certainly not something that comes from verbal communication, especially with a child, like, you know, a 1 or 2 year old. You don't develop that through talking to them because they can't talk. So there's something going on there. But
I think there's definitely a bond, you know, that like you have with this little person, and they just don't have those filters. They're not thinking about any limiting thing unless that you put something there. And sometimes I have those little moments with my son where I'm just like, I don't know, did we just have a little psychic friend moment? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll think of a word and he'll just say it out loud, but I can't tell if that's because, you know, it really went there or if it was just a lucky thing. But it happens enough that I think it's more than luck.
I think it's definitely more than luck.
I want to, we're in the second hour, and I want to move on to the ET contact part of this conversation. We've kind of explained the basic broad strokes of what's going on in terms of telepathy and psionics. Talk to us about contacting non-human intelligence. What is that process like? And how do you know when you're talking to a non-human intelligence or when you're actually communicating with something outside of you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you are doing this through remote viewing, most remote viewers out there, including the military Stargate Program remote viewers, have reported when you look at different ET events, say the crash at Roswell or Mars at the time a civilization lived there, like Joe McMonagle's mentioning, any kind of interesting, ET target that has some basis in reality. If you look at these kinds of events and there are ETs present that you're remote viewing, you're looking at them, you're describing them, you're getting a sense of what they're doing, what their motivations are. Oftentimes you'll start getting a message, and it's very clear. The first time that this happens with remote viewers, it can be shocking, surprising, because they're not expecting to get a message or to hear the thoughts of these individuals out there. And so it has this particular feeling to it that is unmistakable. And you can use that to initiate a conversation. If they talk to you, you can talk back to them. Now, sometimes they might say, hey, leave me alone. I'm not interested in talking with you. And in that case, you can always say, well, okay, I will leave you alone, and you can move on and start describing something else. But oftentimes they can be pretty chatty. And what's interesting is that the messages that you might get from these individuals, it's very non-human. That's one thing that I think in the whole field of ufology is very important to think about. We tend to anthropomorphize absolutely everything in regard to this phenomenon. We put a human face on everything. We think that they have similar motivations that we might have. Like we look at the so-called gray aliens or the reptilians, and we have ascribed particular motivations and reasons for their actions. But those are just judgment calls based on our own understanding of humanity, not based on what they may be, this non-human intelligence. So oftentimes it can be difficult to discern what a message actually means because you're putting a human face on it. You're making a determination, a conclusion, because you see it through your own filters. So it takes some practice to get good at this and to truly start understanding. Oftentimes the information, if you're doing a communications protocol, can come in these huge information packets. This is also very common. And I call those thought balls. There's no like a particular name for them. That's just the name that I use.
Like a download? Would that
it's like a download. The download. Okay. People use the word download. And so sometimes you have to, that download will just be sitting there in your mind and you have to pull it apart, like unraveling a scarf that's been knit or peeling the layers off of an onion. You have to try to understand it little by little. A lot of times, though, people who do have some kind of ET communication, they do put too much of a human face on it, and And so you have people that make predictions.
Right.
Some of the channelers, Bashar and others, they'll make their predictions. And if they are truly having some kind of real contact, I think they're anthropomorphizing too much and not truly getting the real alien message and experience, which truly feels non-human. If you're doing it right, it feels strange.
I'm glad you mentioned Bashar and predictions, because this is, I think, where a lot of people get confused or maybe just start to ask a lot of questions. Because you see, for people who don't know, Bashar is a channeler. Bashar is the entity, right? And the channeler is Daryl Anka.
Anka.
And there are numerous channelers. There's the raw material. There's the Seth books. There's all kinds of different channel material out there. And of course, we have Chris Bledsoe, who has most recently been making very, very specific predictions.
Yes,
which is a kind of a bold thing to do, considering how few of them how they ever really happen. But he's doing it, and I think people wonder, like, how do you know? How do you know when you're channeling or when you're just, it's your internal monologue just running along and doing its thing, and you're just saying it out loud? You say it feels alien or it feels non-human when you connect with a non-human intelligence, and then if you're trying to communicate with it, whatever information you're getting back, if I'm understanding you right, before we even grok it, we have to translate it into our own human terms. And a lot gets lost there. Is that what you're saying?
A lot gets lost because many of these beings are so far advanced from humanity. Their civilizations might have existed for millions of years.
Yeah.
They use technology way in advance of what we have. And so the language that they're going to use or the message that they'll give you can feel extraordinarily complicated and unusual. Sometimes you get the sense too that they're trying to dumb it down for you because you're just a lowly human.
That's hilarious.
It's like talking to your dog. I've got a dog, and when I talk to him, I don't have a conversation like this. I say, "Oh, what a good boy. Who's a pretty boy?" You talk like that with your dog. And sometimes you get the sense that the ETs or whoever it is talking to you, the non-human intelligence, that they're doing the same to you. I sometimes feel that way, and it can be embarrassing. I know I'm a dummy.
I think it makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, right? If you had a civilization that was super advanced, who said this? There was Robert Bigelow. In an interview with Jeffrey Mishlove that I watched the other day, he said humans have spiritually flatlined. That was his term. He said we've spiritually flatlined. We're already we're way down closer to the bottom of the totem pole of intelligences than we think we are. And he said we've also spiritually been not developing at all, very, very much, really. And these other civilizations have had millions of years possibly on top of us to really develop in all of these different ways. And I like that term you use, thought ball. You throw a thought ball to a human. It's like, it's too much. Like the average human just has no idea what to do with that kind of information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, just you take your average, teacher or welder or bookkeeper, and then an alien gives them a thought ball with all this complex information about, energy or propulsion or even philosophical ideas. And you can only understand what you're capable of understanding. So, it's hard.
That's interesting. God, man, that is really... But it makes sense, though, because if you had a civilization that was that old and it had maybe outposts all over the galaxy or maybe across dimensions or across time, with telepathy, you can communicate across infinite distance, across infinite time. There's no barrier. So it's in fact, if I remember right, is it true? I think I read this in one of Ingo's books, that they found when they were studying remote viewing that there is no way to shield against it. There's no concrete wall thick enough. There's no bunker deep enough. There's no mountain you can hide under. It's
That's
impossible.
exactly right. That's exactly right. And what's interesting is sometimes you may come up against, like if you're looking at a non-human intelligence, sometimes you may come up with the idea that they're trying to block you from seeing what they're doing. You'll get the sense that there's a block in place, but that's always a mental psychological construct. They're telling you, they're sending you a telepathic message. Oh, we're blocking you. We're blocking you. And so you just assume you're blocked and you walk away. But you can do these visualization techniques where on your paper you draw a door and say, okay, I'm going through the block. I'm going through the door. And I've done that in some of my sessions that I've posted online when I felt blocked. I'm like, okay, I can get past this block. And yeah, you're right.
That's
Nothing that's
kind of
secret.
funny.
Literally nothing.
It reminds me of, I was playing with my son the other day and we were playing The Floor is Lava, but he can have magic shoes. Apparently, this is a rule that he invented. He has magic shoes, so he can walk on the lava from time to time when he needs to. I cannot. So my feet melted off and I have 2 potatoes for feet. That's what he gave me. So, but it's interesting that it's the thought space, it's the mental space. So it is in a sense kind of like sorcery or it's not magic,
Right.
it's real, but it's like you have
Exactly.
to visualize and you have to use this mental tool kit.
Right.
I can see that. That's interesting. So you have successfully communicated with non-human intelligences.
Yes.
What can you tell us? Like, what have you been able to learn?
Yeah,
I think that's the one thing most people want to know is like, well, what do they have? What is going on? Like, what can you tell us anything?
Yeah, there's all kinds of different non-human intelligences that have interacted with humanity in different time periods or on this planet. Multiple ones interacting with us right now. I mean, people describe all different kinds. So one message doesn't fit all. They all have their own motivations and ideas and desires and interests in what we're doing. So one of the types of non-human intelligence that I have had a connection with fairly recently over the past few months is the so-called New Jersey drones. Since November, people have been reporting, and it's still happening today, seeing strange drone-like lights in the sky and these craft that are flying around, some of them the size of an SUV or a small home. And these are still mysterious. Nobody knows what they are. There's been a lot of controversy about the drones, but they're still being reported today. And I did a number of sessions on these drones, and I did have communication with them. And what was kind of interesting, these were extraordinarily non-human. These weren't your typical like gray aliens or Pleiadians or what have you. These were a tiny intelligence, like so tiny that they exist on the quantum level, perhaps, or even a level beneath the quantum level, whatever that may be. And they're manifesting or creating through consciousness. They're mimicking the things that they see in the sky. So they're kind of tricksters, but they're highly interested in humanity and in the earth in general. They see humanity. This is kind of like the conversation I had with them. They see humanity not as like a bunch of individuals or even as a group. They see us as being literally part of this planet. We rise from the planet. We are no different than a tree, a maple tree, or a babbling brook, or an ant pile. We are just part of this planet. But they see that we are doing things to this planet that are destructive in many different kinds of ways. And they see that we are, resource hoarding, that there is a strata where some of us have a lot more than others. That's the 1%, 99% sort of an idea. They've also expressed that they've been keeping an eye out on the sun. I could see it. I could see it in this kind of a thought ball I got from them, that half of what they're doing is collecting data on us. The other half is like monitoring what's going on with the sun. Now we're in this period of a solar maximum right now. So maybe they're looking at that. Maybe they're worried about a solar flare, a micronova, who knows? But they seem to be interested in that. But one thing they're also really, really interested in, and I think that this is because in some way it's like them in a way, because I got the sense that that they felt to me a little bit like an artificial intelligence, but an extraordinarily highly sophisticated one that was non-human, but they were sentient. So it's a real a general artificial intelligence, one that's real and sentient and thinking and can manipulate things, works in a collective. It's some kind of a thing like that, these drones. But they were concerned about our approach to artificial intelligence and what we're doing and how we're giving up so much of our lives to technology, which we are. So that's one of the messages that I've gotten recently. It's pretty interesting. And they seemed more interested in telling me things than in me telling them things. It seemed like they could already see everything in my head. They already knew everything that I've ever experienced or thought, because that was the other part of the message, was that they experience time very differently than we do. We experience time in these little discrete moments, this moment, then the next minute and the next minute. But their moments are huge, and in our terms might be years or lifetimes or eons even, and they can see the entirety all at once. And so they look at us so differently than we're able to look at them.
That is so fascinating. That sounds like it sounds like AI. It sounds like some kind of, what is it? Sam Harris gave a TED talk years ago, and he was talking about AGI, and he said something like, for every 7 days that a computer system has to work, it can do 30,000 years of human work. So 7 days is the equivalent of, more or less, at the time he gave the speech, it was like 30,000 years of time. So if you could run at those speeds, if you could transfer your consciousness into a computer and run at that speed, you could, in a week, you could live 30,000 years. And if we are in some kind of simulation, as some people have suggested, it's possible, maybe, that's why thoughts can transcend. They can communicate across the medium, and maybe there's some kind of AI monitoring all of this. It's so hard to know and understand what it could all mean, but I feel like AI, our own rapid development of AI, has got to have something to do with it.
I think it absolutely does. I think it absolutely does. And in fact, in the most recent drone session I did, which was on, I just posted a couple of days ago on the drones. Where are they during the day? So somebody gave that to me to look at because, people see them at night, but where do these things go during the day? Are they hiding or what? And so they're still there during the day. They're just kind of invisible. They're able to reflect, or like a mirror in a way. So maybe it's some kind of cloaking device that
it kind of sounds
reflection.
Like you made me think of the way they look like a conventional, a more or less conventional style aircraft when people can see them. Like there's a blinking light, and we're used to seeing blinking lights, but it's not like navigation lights on a real plane. It doesn't make sense. Sometimes you'll see things that look appropriate, but they're used in the wrong way. And I wonder if that's like a fishing lure. Like we would make a fishing lure that looks like a piece of bait, but it's actually just silicone or whatever, and they throw it in the water, and fish look at it and they, oh, that looks like a fish, but it's not. Or some kind of a decoy.
Yeah,
so it's
like a duck decoy or a duck blind, that the hunters go in, so that they can watch you, but you don't know what's really going on behind. Yeah.
Right. Or as my son would probably say, it's like when the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles put on their trench coats to go see a movie or go.
Perfect.
It's a disguise.
Exactly.
But it's not perfect, so it looks weird to us because we look at it and go, that's not exactly right.
It's that uncanny valley effect.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you get the sense when you've done these sessions and you've looked at this, do you get the sense that there is some kind of a, an event, or is there some kind of endpoint, or is there something that we're going to see happen? We've got Chris Bledsoe saying he's got a prediction for next year. He's saying there's something going to happen. What do you see?
Yeah, I think that we are headed towards something real that's going to happen. Now, I don't have a particular date in mind or even a particular event, but I'm just looking, if you look at all the evidence, it's pretty convincing. So our modern disclosure movement started in 2017, right? With the New York Times article coming out talking about the Navy Tic Tacs, the videos were released. Lou Elizondo came out. He was joined by Chris Mellon talking about his work. as Assistant Secretary of Defense. And then we had, a number of other people that started the ball rolling. And then we had Congress get involved. But it's interesting that all of a sudden in 2017, there has been this slow rollout, and it seems to be highly orchestrated. I believe it is. I think that this is a legitimate operation, a benevolent one, mind you. I don't think that it's like a negative, like a PSYOP or like a Project Bluebeam. I don't think it's anything like that. I think that this is a legitimate, benevolent operation to get the public on board, to understanding that this is a real phenomenon. And now we're moving from, yes, there's things in the sky. We move from weird lights in the sky to physical craft retrievals to now we're talking about the sentient beings and consciousness. So we're taking the public along for this kind of rapid, slow and rapid at the same time ride. And I feel that there's a reason for this. Why else? Why else would all of these people work in concert together? Why would Senator Schumer, get out there and write this absolutely incredible UAP disclosure bill?
Bipartisan bill too.
Bipartisan bill, exactly. Why?
When these groups these parties can't agree on
anything.
They can't agree what time it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why is everybody on board all of a sudden when for decades everybody was into the topic, like myself, we were just ridiculed and made fun of. Now everyone's getting on board. So I think that that's deliberate to get the American public or the world at large ready, because something is going to happen. They have to disclose it probably by a certain date or a certain time period or before a certain something they know is coming. So I do think that there is something in the future. And a number of other people have talked about this kind of, throwing out similar dates, 2026, Chris Bledsoe, 2027, John Ramirez, Leslie Kane, and others. And then there's some people talking about 2030, 2032. There's been a number of dates, but they're all within 5 or 10 years. And I do believe that we're going to have disclosure in the next few years for sure. And I do believe it's leading up to some event. Now, what that event is a real mystery still. And I've got people working on it to find out all the particulars about that. But I do think it is going to be some kind of a event that includes open contact, maybe a Phoenix Lights type of event where there's a big flyover. Maybe the James Webb Telescope has picked up something. You never know. So
I sometimes wonder what your thoughts are on this, but it's like, we're like, when's the big event going to happen? And I think the aliens are like, we've done the big event like 20 times. We flew over the White House.
That's
the
right.
Phoenix Lights. That was us. We've, like every time we show up, you guys pretend it's not real.
And now it's the drones, right? We had the Phoenix Lights and nobody took that seriously. And now the drone show, it's still going on, but the media is just shut up about it.
Yeah, you're right. And I'm inclined to agree with you. I feel like there is something motivating all this. It's kind of been, I don't know, just in the back of my mind for at least a year now. That there's just got to be, there's too much motion. There's too much like energy. There's too much smoke for there to be no fire.
Exactly.
I wonder, this is just for people who are watching at home, if you're in the chat, just curious what people in the chat think. Do you guys feel something in the air? I don't know if it's because I'm just naturally an anxious person and I've just like got this anxiety gene or whatever, but I feel like something feels like it's about to break. Something feels like it's about to give, and I can't tell what it is. It could be anything, but I'm fully prepared to look at my phone and see some crazy shit happen almost any day now. I don't know what it's going to be, but something big.
Yeah, I think we're headed toward that. And that's another reason why maybe now is the time. And this is why we're having the conversation shifting to this idea of psionics and consciousness, remote viewing, psychic abilities as being a major part of this phenomenon. Because if we are leading to some big event with open contact, well, we should get a group of people together who are highly skilled in these areas so that they can have this kind of communication back and forth. So that's one of the things that I'm super interested in. I do teach ET communication as a part of my beginning classes in TransDimensional Mapping, and I will be teaching an advanced class in it later this year. And it's super interesting and fun, and everybody always has a transformative experience. But I'm hoping to get groups together that are going to be able to cross that divide and extend a hand. We have to get our ambassadors ready.
I think that's the most exciting part about this for me and for many people. It's this idea that you don't have to wait for the government to come clean. There might be a contact event that's just precipitated by regular people. It could just be
That's
some
right.
totally different thing than we've all expected this whole time. And maybe it is something where, you find that 100th monkey or however many people need to be doing it. Chris Bledsoe, I watched him on his son's podcast a few weeks back, and he said something very interesting. And he said, they don't want people realizing that anyone can contact them. It's like once people realize there's an open line, the government loses control over this whole thing. And what happens if they just show up? And I thought, man, that is brilliant. What if that's really if it's that simple, that psychic abilities are just inherently there for all of us to learn how to tap into. But if we were to really, really do it, it would throw the whole power structure completely out of balance.
It absolutely would. There's no question. I mean, they've already shown that groups working together can affect things like random number generators. There's a lot of studies done, peer-reviewed studies out there talking about this kind of group consciousness effect. And just imagine if everybody out there started doing this kind of work, started working on things like remote viewing, started taking on a meditation practice with this idea they're going to extend their consciousness to understand the universe, I think would be unstoppable. I think that that's where we need to be as a species, that we need to get to gird our loins and get out there and really start thinking about ourselves as being galactic citizens and not just somebody who's just trying to make a basic living on one simple planet. I think if we think of ourselves as the incredible, big, bold creatures that we are, I think we would have a much easier time making some big changes.
That's such a great point. There's a friend of the show, Pavel, who has his own channel called Psychoactivo, and he always talks about this idea of we need like a training academy. We need like a way to teach people how to be human, almost.
Right.
Like, what is your potential? What is your full potential? And how could you, not just survive in a machine of society and find a job to pay the bills and then just work until you die, but how do you become the being that you're truly capable of being? And what would that look like? Does that look like, I think of these like Shaolin monks, or these people who are very spiritually adept, or you see people who can like meditate in the freezing ice in sub-zero temperatures and there's steam coming off their body and they can just sit there in a t-shirt. Wim Hof is one of those people.
Oh, sure.
The power is really amazing when you see someone who can do these things, do it. It looks like magic.
Yes, absolutely.
How does one protect themselves? What are the dangers, if any? Are there dangers, I guess, to walking into this world, newly stepping into it for the first time, not knowing what you're dealing with, not knowing all the different things that are out there? How do you, when you teach people how to do this, how do they, what are some street smarts that they need to know?
That's a great question. There's a lot of talk in remote viewing circles about whether or not you should even look at things like ETs, or whether you should even, if you have a communication going on, whether you should even extend yourself in that way. And I am in the camp that believes that you can't divide consciousness up into like slices of a pie and pick and choose particular slices and leave the rest. I think that we're all connected already to absolutely everything, which is why we can access this incredible non-local information. But I like to tell students that they're in charge here. It's like I mentioned before, if you feel that, you're talking with or trying to have a conversation with a particular ET, say, and they want to block you, it's always good to respect the boundaries that somebody else has laid out there, unless you feel that that block is just because maybe they're a little bored, or, they're not that interested in you, then you can try to cross that barrier. I don't believe that there's anything that can harm a person, harm a remote viewer. Maybe if somebody comes to the practice and they're already mentally ill in some way, they have a mental imbalance, then that's not a good candidate for remote viewing. But if you're a fairly balanced individual, I don't believe that there's anything that can harm you. You're just exploring the boundaries of your own abilities, and that includes, connecting with everything around you. You can have contact with ancient people in the past. Oftentimes in a session, if you're looking at, say, Abraham Lincoln giving the Gettysburg Address, you'll know what he's thinking. You can read Abraham Lincoln's mind. It's the same thing, but just with an alien or with a non-human intelligence of some sort. It's just a conversation. It's natural. It feels natural. And here on our planet, all of humanity, we've got your good people and we've got your goobers, right? And maybe you don't want to have a conversation with somebody who's a goober.
Sure.
And I think it's the same for non-human intelligence too. You've got your beautiful, compassionate, loving, highly advanced species. And then you have those that maybe are a little rough around the edges or that don't have a value system that you could ever appreciate. And so if you're going to contact someone, then you might want to think about contacting somebody who's positive, uplifting, and who has overcome the things that humanity is trying to overcome these days.
It would just be hilarious if we find out that we're at the absolute bottom of the totem pole. Like we're just the dumbest. I feel like that's what's coming, don't you? We're gonna have contact and they're gonna be like, okay, guys, but like you're in, but barely. You know what you got. F plus, like you're barely shouldn't even be here, but we're gonna let you in this time.
Yeah, we really are like that. We're doing our best, but we have a long way to go. And if you think about it, think of where we were just 100 years ago. No computers. And in 100 years, we've gone to the moon. We've developed personal computers, a cell phone, quantum computing, and now artificial intelligence. That's a very short period of time. Heck, 200 years ago, people didn't even know that dinosaurs existed. Think about that. They weren't even discovered until the mid 1800s or something. And so, think of where we're going to be 50 years from today or 100 years from today. And some of these non-human intelligences interacting with us might be millions of years beyond where we've come. So, in a very short period of time. So yeah, I think we're at the bottom of the totem pole. I'd agree with that.
We're definitely, well, I mean, what do they say? You can just look around. I mean, you can go inside of it's like any department store, go into a TJ Maxx and look at all the crap on the floor.
Exactly.
Go look at like the way we organize stuff. It's kind of crazy. And it's also been said, I've heard it argued convincingly that there's been enough time just on Earth. There's been enough time for multiple civilizations to have been come and gone and advanced way beyond us and then disappeared. And then, maybe that's happened 3 or 4 times before we even showed up here. Not to mention,
I think so,
the rest of the galaxy and all the other galaxies, of course. So we've got a lot of different types of non-human intelligence. They're doing all kinds of different things. Some of them are good. Some of them are not so good. They're all able to access this sort of psychic internet, which sort of seems like that's the substrate that everybody's running on. Where do flying saucers and grays and all we've heard from different contactees and different experiencers descriptions of all kinds of different beings. Small grays, tall grays, medium grays, mantis beings, Pleiadians who are somehow like always super sexy. They're always like the Nordics. They're always like in yoga pants and stuff. How do we square what we know, what we've learned so far up until 2017, and all of this new stuff that's coming out with psionics and where we're going? How do you make sense of it all?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. If you look at, all of the descriptions of sightings going back throughout human history, there are multiple sightings going back to like antiquity. If there's a Jacques Vallée, famous UFO researcher and scientist, brilliant man, Dr. Jacques Vallée. He wrote a book called Wonders in the Sky, and it's just page after page of historic sightings. It's an incredible book. Great book for the bathroom because you can read a page at a time. But it goes back and it describes all these different kinds of things that have happened. And it's just like all of the sightings that people have today. Back in antiquity, people would describe hats in the sky. That's a typical flying saucer right there. Or they describe orb-like things, spheres, or they would describe flying spears. Of course, those are your triangle UFOs. So we've seen these things over and over throughout all our human history. And sometimes they describe in antiquity devil type beings, but the description sounds like a little gray alien. So I think all of these accounts that people have had, because thousands of people have reported the same kinds of things, I think that these things are just as they are. There is a species, the little gray aliens, and where they're from, maybe we don't know, right? And then there's the sexy Pleiadians. Hey, they exist too, and it's just possible that all of these different kinds of species have interacted with us over time and in different ways. And it's also possible that these different species have relationships with each other, not just with us, but with each other. And that brings up like questions like, is there a governing body out there? Is there truly a galactic federation? Like in Star Trek, or some people have said. So you'd think if these different beings are buzzing the planet, that they would be aware of each other. So it brings up some interesting kind of questions, honestly, the number of different types of species we've experienced.
Well, this is what I find so interesting about your work with Ubiquity and with the Psionics Summit. And just I went back and watched some of the first part of the last one that I didn't see when it was live. And Jim Garrison gave this great presentation at the beginning, and he's talking about, I jokingly called it his Braveheart speech, but he's giving this really poignant presentation about the importance of this moment and how big this moment really will be when we look back on it in 100 years' time. That this was the time when we were struggling to really understand what we were dealing with, but we were learning how to communicate. And it was so inspiring. And then to see speaker after speaker talk about this in an organized way. But one of the things that he articulated was, we've got to start thinking about how we're going to be in contact and how we're going to relate to these other civilizations. Who is going to speak for Earth? Who speaks for all humans? How do you decide? It can't just be one government, or it can't just be one group. It almost has to be all of us, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that this is where consciousness comes into play, because you don't want the president or the prime minister or some other kind of leader from a particular country calling the shots and having the relationship. You don't want it to be top down, especially something this important. This is, open contact, or at least disclosure it will be when somebody out there, when some world leader out there finally acknowledges that we truly are not alone. We've already gone through soft disclosure, but the big D disclosure, when that happens, that's going to be the biggest moment in all of human history up to that point. And there's even no question about that. It's going to be an enormous paradigm shift. And then the next paradigm shift will be when we do have some kind of open contact. And I agree with you completely, Clint. We really need to have this be a more egalitarian process where everybody has a chance to offer, a say and to understand what's happening, and not just be fed little bits of information. It's too important to keep in the hands of a select few, the hands of the oligarchs or what have you. You want this to be something that's fair and open for everybody.
It's so weird to think about, like, the way our planet works and the way our civilization works right now, and especially recently in the last few months, just the way the news, if you pay any attention to the news at all, it's just, no matter what side of any issue you're on, it's just crazy what's happening.
Right.
And it seems to be accelerating, and there's just so much going on. But you think about, like, the power elite in the world, the wealthy top 1% of the 1% who really own everything. they have no incentive at all for regular people to understand any of this. There's no
That's right.
incentive. Because if it were to become common knowledge, if disclosure happened tomorrow, big D disclosure happened tomorrow, or whenever it happens, those people who are now at the top of that power pyramid won't be at the top anymore. They'll be somewhere close to the bottom with the rest of us, and there'll be this other thing that's way higher up. And it makes you wonder, like, how can what do we take with us as humans? What is it about being a human being that we really bring to the it's not Walmart, it's not Starbucks, it's not McDonald's, it's not Elon Musk. It's got to be something deeper than that, something more meaningful than that. And I think you were talking to Xander in the chat before we started, and you said something to that effect. You were talking about this AI future that we're going into and deciding what it means to be human, and we're going to have to make some hard choices about that. Can you talk about that a little bit more in detail? What
Yeah,
you meant by that?
absolutely. Yeah, I think the humanity is at a crossroads right now. We have been becoming less and less human in a way as the years go by. I look back to, and I'm going to sound like one of those old people, get off my lawn right now, but I think there's a lot of truth to this. We've given over so much of our life to technology. Think about how many hours of the day that you spend in front of a screen. I mean, I am as guilty as everybody here. So I'm
Oh God, I got my screen time report on my phone. You know how
oh
kids
my
do
gosh,
that.
it's terrifying,
It's
isn't
over
it?
5 hours a day.
Right. It is. And so that's time that you're not spending out in nature. That's time that you're not spending learning a craft or a trade or something that could be important. If you think about humanity before the very modern era, the last 50, 100 years, you had to memorize things in order to go about your life. Even I, as a kid, there were no cell phones. We had
Or
rotary
you knew
dial
like
phones.
everybody's phone number.
You knew everybody's phone number. Now
Like
I
that,
literally know nobody's phone number. I just
I don't
ask
even know my
Siri
own.
to call whoever. Right, exactly. And
They're like,
so
you get to a form and it's like, put in, what's your phone number? I'm like, oh shit, what is my phone number? Sorry, I keep interrupting.
but it's true. It's true. So we've been giving up little pieces of ourselves to technology, and now we have AI that's come on. And right now, the consumer level AI. So we've got your Chat GPT, or your Claude, your other Pi, the other large language models. They're becoming more and more sophisticated, but still they're fairly rudimentary. But you have people that are using these now to generate content on the internet. So most content that you read out there, new content, most of it is AI generated and maybe massaged by a human after the fact, but not always. So we're losing less and less of our ability to kind of create these things ourselves, to create art ourselves, or to appreciate and to understand and to recognize things like this. And so we're going to reach a point, and we also are dealing with the proliferation of nuclear weaponry and resource hoarding that is continuing to go on. All of these different kind of racial divides out there, genocide in different places on the planet. And so we're in a bad space right now, but we have opportunities to make some better decisions going forward. And I'm thinking that people are starting to wake up to this with all of this new discussion about consciousness and how all of this relates to our own innate abilities. Because the more that you get involved in exploring your own consciousness abilities, the more you see how disconnected you are. And this is something I wrestle with. And so I make sure I get out every day, go for a walk, make sure I spend time outside. I'm a beekeeper. I've got beehives in my backyard.
Are you really a beekeeper?
Yeah, I am.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
How many bees
Been doing that for years. I have 4 hives in my backyard. I live, in an urban setting, and we're allowed to keep bees in Albuquerque. So I've got 4 hives in my backyard, and each hive has between 50 and 100,000 bees. So it's a lot of bees.
How much honey? I'm just curious. How much honey do you get out of each hive? And how often do you get honey?
Yeah, I collect honey once a year, and I don't always collect honey. It really depends on the weather. We've had some very dry years recently, and when you have a drought, which we've been living through here in Albuquerque, the bees don't make as much honey, and they need honey to get through the winter. That's
Yeah.
that's what they live on in the winter. It's their food. So I try not to steal too much from them. But some years when we have a wet spring and there's lots of flowers around and they're have a fun time foraging, the honey will just explode. They'll make a ton of it and then I can collect it. But so it ranges from maybe a gallon per hive to way more than that a year.
Wow.
I give it away. I give it away. I give it to my family and friends and enjoy it myself.
I just sorry to take such a weird left field diversion, but
hey, no, this is like this
cool.
is part of the conversation. This is a way to connect with nature, to keep yourself engaged. I really recommend anyone out there, even if you don't plan on getting into remote viewing or any kind of psionics or anything like this, at least get out there and spend some time in nature. It's going to make you more aware, and all of those senses that have been blunted by the constant barrage of things coming from your screen will start opening up. You think about some of our indigenous populations and how they're able to understand things in the world around them, how they would, hunt and gather and just know things about the world, how they can communicate with animals. You can do that too if you spend some time outside.
I think that is so true. I have felt that myself in my own experience. And I think everybody has. I think everybody knows what it feels like. It's
Yes.
just sometimes you forget. And you're so right. There's I'm not an expert in any indigenous anything, but I remember one very compelling documentary that I years ago, and it was on Hopi prophecy, the Hopi prophecy, and there was this rock, and it was the glyphs on the rock, and it was humanity moving along one path, and then it splits into two paths, and one path is the nature path, and one path is the path of technology.
Right.
And I remember watching this, and I was like, "That is so fascinating." It does feel like if we're at that
we
point
are. We're
of
at
choosing.
that point right now. Right now, we are facing this, and now we're facing, this artificial intelligence that's starting to take over jobs, and we're reaching the point of perhaps the singularity. And so we have got to make some tough decisions right now. So, I am betting on humanity. Like I've said, we've looked at it in the future, and we do make it. But man, we have got to get through some stuff.
Some stuff, yeah. It's the AI thing is now so fast. I watched just in the last week. It's every single week now. My brain explodes because there's so much new stuff going on. I don't know if you've seen. Just in the last 7 days, there were like 4 videos from Boston Dynamics. There's a Chinese robotics company. Have you seen the Atlas robot dancing?
The Atlas robot is absolutely terrifying, in my opinion.
It can break dance like a person.
And terrifying, right?
Oh my God. And all I can think about every time they're like, look, here's one doing a cartwheel. Here's one, it's breakdancing. Look how cool. Look how fluid it is. And I'm thinking, wait until 100,000 of those things come barricading through your or barreling through your city.
Exactly.
Oh my God. And we really do have to get in touch with what's important. And I think you're right. Spending that time away from the screen, it's like you just experience time differently. It all kind of Oh, Xander, you've got the clip here. This is insane.
Yeah, look how fluid that motion is. And just imagine, our military, as we speak, they are ordering these things in droves,
This is
I heard they trained this latest model using AI on human walking to make it basically walk more like a human. It's less efficient for it to walk like a human, but they wanted to mimic human walking so that it'd be able to fool us, basically. So whilst it's less efficient, you can see it's there. It's slowing down like a human would. It's if it was in human clothes, you'd think it was a human dressed as a robot.
Did you see the video of the Chinese robots? They're using them in a mall, a shopping mall, as mannequins, but they're walking around like people.
Yes, yeah,
seen
on treadmills as well.
Oh my God, it's crazy. So this is the thing, right? And I don't think people are really thinking this through. It's like, what happens when you've got 100 million of these robots and Elon Musk? Now, maybe it's not Elon. Maybe it's just pick your freaking billionaire or whoever at the very, very top, and they just go, you know what? I'm going to weaponize all these today. And they go, boop, boop, boop. And suddenly they're all under the control of one person or something sinister. Like we're so close to the edge of darkness with this technology. It's really, really weird.
Yes, we are. And then there's the whole question of hackers, hacking into, think about that. You can get your
murder by robot
from various, right.
What happens when one of these robots chokes somebody to death in their sleep? I don't want to end on a bad note, but good Lord, can you imagine?
It's a cautionary tale.
Or maybe here it is, the Man Zone. This is my favorite store.
Wow.
It's not really my favorite store, but look at this. These are robots. China is also way far ahead of us too. It's like what they're doing is insane.
Yes. Absolutely.
Birdie, is there anything that we haven't talked about? We're in the last 6 minutes here. Is there anything we haven't covered? We've talked about so much that you want to touch on.
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm just super excited to be part of the Psionics Summit on March 30th. You can check that out at Ubiquity University. And this Sunday, I'm teaching a class on how to teach your child remote viewing. It's a 6-hour hands-on class where you will learn a super intuitive and easy method of remote viewing that you can share with your child or grandchild, and you can use it yourself. And we're going to do some communication with animal species as part of this. So it'll be super exciting. And then you can extrapolate that into ET communication if you so desire. And I just look forward to the future. I think that humanity is going to make it. I really do. I think we are at a tough time right now, but I believe from everything I have been saying, from this new excitement about consciousness, psionics, how the conversation around disclosure is shifting. The narrative is no longer strictly national security and nuts and bolts. Now we're talking about people getting out in the field and calling down the craft and having deep communication with them. So I invite everyone to look into all of these areas and to see what kinds of ways that they can express their own innate potential in this area and learn some remote viewing if you like. I guarantee, regardless of where you take your training, you'll have an incredible time. I'm just really glad to have been here today and have this conversation. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, Birdie, this has been a joy. It's so great to talk to you, and I'm so glad we were able to make this work. I have to ask you, and I'm curious because the way you wrapped that up was so beautiful. Do you think there's a critical mass of people, like if you could have 1,000 people all do the same meditation at the same time, or a soccer stadium filled with people all doing the same meditation at the same time, do you think there's a higher likelihood that we could actually call down a craft and make it appear?
100%.
Or does it matter?
100%. I absolutely believe it's kind of that 100th monkey effect. You get enough people working on something in the same, time and space, and it just happens. I see this in classes. There's always a mass consciousness effect that happens in my remote viewing classes where they're all working on a session at the same time. And wow, they just get such incredible data because they're opening up this field together. This should be something that we all do together. We are part of the same human family, and we need to be thinking about it ourselves that way, that we're a human family and we're about to become part of a bigger cosmic family.
That is so perfect. What a great way to end it. Xander, is there anything that you wanted to ask before we wrap up?
We'd need another hour.
We need another hour. We do need.
Let me have a quick look at my notes here.
Xander comes in with like a Google Doc that's 12 pages deep. He's got a spreadsheet.
I've ranked the questions by their validity and all sorts here. Look, I think just to maybe focus a little bit more on you talked earlier about the level of the playing field when we go a little bit further up when we find out how low down on the scale of things we really are, and it really puts the billionaires and the people in control in perspective, that they really aren't that much further ahead than us. I think there's something to be said, and I think there's a reason why you mentioned nature and things like that. I think there's a big difference between the feeling of hanging out with your daughter on the beach, or going out into nature and flying first class. Like, one of those things is more valuable than the other. And it also happens that one of those things you don't need to be in the top 1% to experience. And that's what I think is potentially is the reason why the 1% or the 0.001% wouldn't want, this next phase of humanity to happen, is because the things that really do matter and the things that we all enjoy most in life really are the things that we don't have to pay for and we don't have to pay them for. So that would probably be my 2 cents if I had to say anything on the matter. I'll leave it there, I think.
That's a great place to leave it. I have to show one more thing that I promised I would do. So real quick before we wrap up, Birdie, if you can hang tight for one more second, we're gonna,
absolutely.
You're probably gonna want to see this too because this is super cool. I have to share my screen, so let me see if I can get this to work here. Let's do. Google Chrome is requesting permissions. Oh boy, here we go. All right, let's see if I can make this work. So this is. I asked. We had some fans send in some pictures of them wearing Night Shift merch. And this is Derek from Portland. I think it's Maine. Is it Portland, Maine? I don't think it's Oregon. I think it's Portland, Maine. This is Derek. He sent in a picture of him repping the Night Shift shirt at his show for his band. And I just want to say thanks, Derek, for this. This was awesome. Thank you for sending that in. And I've got another shot that he sent me of, he got the pint glass and he filled it up with Guinness. And it looks spectacular. Just wanted to show everybody this. And we have another fan who sent in the hoodie that she's wearing. And she also has a website that I wanted to show because this website is awesome. It's called Into the Unknown. And they do, she's a silversmith and she designs UFO jewelry. So I have to show this really quick. Here we go. UFOs by decade. This is the collection. And I just wanted to show the website because I found out she does this. She sent the picture of the hoodie and I was like, what do you do? And I was looking at her website and this is just so cool. But silver, handcrafted, one-of-a-kind sterling silver jewelry that traces a century of mysterious aerial phenomena through wearable art. And she's got all these cool pins. Here's the Kenneth Arnold sighting, the flying wing. Really famous. Here's one for the Lubbock, Texas sighting. And these are just super cool. So if you guys are interested, anybody watching, if you want to go check it out, it's fromtheinfinitejewelry.com. And then under collections, she's basically got all these like really just iconic sightings that are crafted in the form of jewelry. Here's the Phoenix Lights. Tic Tac.
Coming soon.
Coming soon. I can't wait. All the orbs. Oh, very cool. So we'll see. Anyway, I just wanted to share that with everyone before we wrap up for the day. So thanks, guys, for sending the pictures in. And if you are someone who's watching and you've got a Night Shift shirt or a Night Shift mug or a Night Shift pint glass or anything, and you want to send us a picture, please do, and I will shout you out on the show. And if you've got a website, and we'll work it into the show, and I'll share that. So that's it for now. Thank you, Birdie, for carving out the time for us. This was so wonderful. It was great to speak with you and catch up. I can't wait to do it again after the next Psionics Summit. We'll have you back again. We've got Georg coming from Ubiquity University Friday. He'll be joining us this coming Friday. And we'll have some more fun stuff next week. We'll see you then. Until then, keep looking up. Don't be a stranger. Say hi in the chat. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.